Good morning to everybody in Brussels. This is Matt Daus from New York City. I'm sorry I couldn't be there with you today at the Taxi and Mobility Update 2017. I hope to be there next year. My congratulations to Wim and to Katie for all the good work that you do, and to all of the friends and colleagues that I know. I miss you and I wish I was there. Wim has asked me to talk about the following topic: a quick update on new regulatory accents worldwide. In terms of an accent, as a musician, there's I wouldn't even say that it's a little cymbal that's being hit. It's like a lot of crashing and heavy metal drumming that's been happening, and I'm going to focus mostly on the U.S. Right now because that's where a lot of the noise is coming from, and it also fuels the business model of the TNCs, which are making a big dent into taxi worldwide, that what's happening in the U.S. So we're going to focus a little bit on the U.S. I'm going to give a quick update and the status or the state of regulatory affairs for taxis and for-hire vehicles in the United States. Well, the long and the short of it is it's just not good. Things are getting worse by the day. We're currently in a race to the bottom. Right now, there's deregulation and self-regulation in virtually every state. There are very few states that even have not passed TNC laws. In fact, the one part of the United States, other than Texas and Florida and Connecticut and some others, that really has held back, much like London has, against Uber and Lyft, imposing the same standards as everybody else, as New York City. Now, the good news is that New York City, at least for now, stands out as a regulatory island among the United States. But a recent bill was passed by New York State, by the legislature, and pushed by Governor Cuomo, which fundamentally changes the landscape upstate and all around New York City in the state of New York. And I think there's a couple of things in that law which are problematic and are worse than most every TNC state law that's been passed in the United States. The most important or problematic one is that there is no access to public records. The TNCs now, unlike other states, can't even have the laws enforced against them because they're exempt from the Freedom of Information law. These are laws called sunshine laws that were passed after the Nixon-Watergate scandal in every state in the United States, saying that public records, including the license status of drivers and things that they do and don't do, and their records are a matter of public record. The big issue in New York is if the neighboring counties don't opt out of the TNC law, which is the same cookie cutter law that was passed around the United States. Less insurance requirements, less driver vetting, self-regulation, the same stuff. We're going to see an encroachment into New York City by vehicles that are going to be registered potentially in Nassau and Westchester counties, which adjoin New York City. And there's going to be virtually no way to enforce against an Uber or a Lyft that's going to come into New York City and pick up passengers illegally. The law technically says you can't do pickups and drop-offs within New York City without getting a New York City TLC license. But, New York City can no longer seize or confiscate unlicensed vehicles. It's going to be very difficult to take a passenger out of the car and ask them to see their cell phones. So I think there's going to be a lot of challenges with this new law that was passed. But at the same time, New York City has probably the most level playing field in the United States in some ways. Though on issues of accessibility and taxes paid to mass transit, there are a lot of different things that make the playing field maybe a little bit uneven towards the TNCs, unlike other states where it's completely, a huge disparity. They've done some things at the local level which are good, which I think will help to make the playing field more even in New York City. The thing we really need to keep an eye on, though, is to see whether these outside cars are going to come into New York City and usurp the entire process. So if the TLC has a really good enforcement plan, maybe it could preserve itself as the only city where Uber and Lyft had to get licensed by the same standards as everybody else. But for now, a couple of things happened recently. Number one, the TLC passed a lot of regulations on driver fatigue, drivers that are sleeping behind the wheel potentially, getting data from Uber and Lyft for the first time. They've made the examination and the testing process to get a for-hire license, which is primarily what Uber and Lyft get, more difficult, raised the standards. So the TLC has leveled the playing field in some areas. And the New York City Council has done some things as well. The New York City Council recently passed a law in light of the medallion crisis, which has seen a drop in values from 1.2 million to anywhere below 500,000. In fact, there was a sale that was a cash sale that was recently reported at 241,000. I believe that the actual cash flow analysis and valuations that we've done with economists at our firm put the value at about 575, which I think is more realistic. But still, that's a big jump. It's almost half. So against that backdrop, the City Council did two things, which I think maybe more localities should do around the country, especially in cities like Philly and Boston and Chicago, where they have medallion systems. Number one, they reduced the transfer tax to try to create a market from 5% to 0.5%. And most importantly, they got rid of the owner must drive rules. So now there's really one corporate medallion. There used to be individual ones, and now and corporate ones that could be driven by anybody 24/7. Now it's going into one system and possibly into one value. So the medallion market is taking a bath. The TNC laws are practically in every state. We need to keep an eye on that. But basically, I think what's going to happen now is it's really not over. I mean, Uber has some major problems. Recently, they got fined by the Federal Trade Commission for $20 million for lying to drivers about what their earnings could be. There are a couple of scandals that happened, not just employment discrimination and culture scenarios at the firm. Uber was charged with some sexual harassment and discrimination allegations, and that there's a culture, that's inappropriate. They have a scandal called grayballing, where they were using technology to evade law enforcement. They also had something known as hell. Yes, it's called hell. Not what the taxi industry is experiencing, but Uber has this app apparently where they can look at their competitors like Lyft and actually see where their Uber drivers are working for their competitors and picking up passengers. And there's also the whole issue about, is it really worth $70 billion? And Travis Kalanick, the CEO, has been under fire. There's talk of change of leadership. There's a new COO that's being put in, and the leadership may change, and Uber may be facing some significant opposition. So it's certainly not over by any means. And I'll talk about two final things, just to give you a quick state of affairs, because what happens here does affect the rest of the world. This is the money engine in terms of the financing for companies like Uber. And even though they lost $3 billion last year, still I think they need to make money and do certain things to become a valuable company, a truly valuable company. Lyft's valuation is somewhere around $8 billion. I doubt Uber has a real valuation of $70 billion, but they could get there. And I think a lot of what they're staking their valuation on is this automated vehicles, and I'll get to that in a second. What's happening now in the industry, the industry's response is interesting. The Taxi, Limousine, and Paratransit Association, the TLPA, has put together a plan where they're actually looking at ways in which they can reduce red tape, become more profitable, ask regulators for more flexible pricing, soft meters that will allow metered fares to go lower to compete with Uber, that also could potentially allow for surge pricing for taxi cabs. They also are changing their marketing. I think Transdev and Z-Trip are looking to rebrand their entity, just like Flywheel did and Cab Connect, as a red cab, something other than yellow, or Z-Trip, which is a sedan service. They're looking to rebrand away from taxi into a new product, which is very interesting. And, using off-site dispatch centers, there's a lot of different things at play now that the TLPA and many operators are contemplating. So we may see a change on the business side. On the for-hire vehicle side, limos, black cars, and sedans, what we're seeing is a lot of mergers and acquisitions. I know Addison Lee is in the audience. Addison Lee, acquired Flight Time, and a lot of the bigger companies are merging and working together in the United States on the high-end limo side. Even in the app field, Get just purchased Juno. And I think we're going to see more and more mergers and acquisitions and people grouping up so that they can more effectively compete with Uber and Lyft as we enter the next zone. Uber's clock is ticking now because of the finance deal with China. They have to repay that debt. I don't think, absent Travis leaving, they could actually make, they can get more equity investment in their company to continue subsidizing drivers and passenger rides. So I think what's going to happen now is they're making one last push to try to decimate the taxi and limo industry, going after business, B2B business. They're going to be reducing their fares significantly to try to squeeze out Lyft and the new app competitors, like Get and Juno and Via. And they're also going to try to squeeze out the taxi industry as much as they can. They need to gather market share so that then they can raise the prices and actually start becoming profitable. But I don't know if that's going to do the trick. But I do know that we're going to see a lot of labor strife here. There's already a lot of labor lawsuits that have been brought against Uber. And I do believe that what's going to happen in the next year or so is you're going to see a driver reaction, an adverse reaction to the fare cuts. And it's going to be interesting to see what these other companies do, Lyft and Uber and Get. And are they going to also compete on price and drive it down to the bottom? And are we going to have a lot of angry workers who are protesting around the country? But I think what's going to happen is they're going to make a push for getting as many drivers churned onto their system, part-time drivers, gig workers, and it's going to be in the next year or two very interesting and sad in many ways to watch, because I think the drivers will be hurt. Passengers may end up on top in some ways, but also I think a lot of businesses will probably go under. But I still think that the industry, the taxi industry, they're looking at various niches that they can get involved in, opportunities in the accessibility area, in suburban areas. The smart companies that will survive will hold on to what they have, treat their drivers really, really well, and look for niche areas of business and cut their expenses as much as they can to survive and come out after the dust settles. Because competitors like Didi, that just raised a tremendous amount of money, and others, Lyft just raised some more money, there's going to be a big TNC war that's going to happen. And, I'm hoping that, the taxis and the limos will not be a side dish, but if they do, they'll taste good or taste better, and they will survive. And there'll be room for some dessert. So I think to sum it up, there's still a lot of unrest. There's even more unrest. But now we're entering a different phase. Now we're entering the phase where TNC state laws are here to stay. We have a new governance model. The taxi regulators, even though they're trying with universal apps and some leveling of the playing field measures, it still falls far short of what they need to do. I mean, the key things to level the playing field are to allow for the surge pricing to go into effect and to really have the same licensing standards. Until we get there, we're going to see some taxi companies which are already diversifying becoming TNCs, those who can afford it. And we have new regulators, many of them Department of Motor Vehicles, that have no idea how to regulate TNCs that are looking at this fresh, while we still have taxi regulators dealing with old, antiquated rules. But one thing I would keep an eye on, just to end on this, is Uber's real path to profitability and sustainability here in the US and worldwide is the autonomous vehicle. Now, I don't think in any way, shape, or form in our lifetimes, in my opinion, that we're going to see autonomous vehicles on the road all over the place, like every car. Nor do I think Uber is going to replace its workforce in the next 5 to 10 years. However, if they are able to obtain the patents on the autonomous vehicle, then their valuation becomes real. They poached the entire robotics team from Carnegie Mellon, and they're putting all of their eggs in the basket. They're going to develop the technology so that they can either patent it and sell it to another company. You see all these partnerships between auto manufacturers and app companies, and I think they're looking at that as the holy grail. If they can do that and pull that off, then we're talking about a real valuation that could be worth many billions of dollars. If they don't, they could fail because they're not profitable on the transportation side. Keep an eye on the Google lawsuit, Waymo. There's a person who left Google that's working on the AV project for Uber. There could be criminal charges. There's certainly a civil lawsuit going on. And Google is the one that could develop its own Uber-type app and has already developed its own automated vehicle and believes that Uber stole the technology. If Uber cannot nail the automated vehicle technology and cannot take over the market in one fell swoop like they plan, the last resort is what we would call a TNC medallion, to come full circle. Given all the money that they spent to get these laws passed, what additional amounts would it take to get the lobbyists to put one sentence in every state law in the U.S. saying that TNCs shall be capped at a certain number, that we shall have those TNCs, and that there'll be a property interest that can be bought and sold. If they do that, the company could be worth many, many billions of dollars. So I think they're making this up as they go along, even though they have a plan, but it's not over yet. The international community has a very different reaction in Europe and elsewhere. You're going to be hearing about that today. I know that, you're going to be having, a workshop and a roundtable discussion. I hope you discuss some of these issues. And I hope to see you all at the IATR conference in Austin, Texas, September 24th to the 27th, where we have a topic very apropos, in sync with the Keeping It Weird motto of the city, called Keeping Regulation Weird. And we're going to have the experts, the best experts on automated vehicle technology, connected vehicles. We're going to have another hackathon. We're going to be talking about all these and many more issues. So we hope you can join us in Austin, Texas, September 24th to 27th. If you go to iatr.global, you should be able to register. It's still early registration time. So we hope to see you, many of you there, and have a great remainder of the conference. And I'll see you next year. And thank you very much for giving me the time.